forward. And as we've talked about so many times this year, and look, they're your two best players. They're preseason All-Americans for a reason. The offense, I don't want to say lives and dies by what they do, but is certainly affected the most by how those two individuals do perform out there at the plate. As I mentioned, when you look at the statistics throughout the season, typically, if they combine to be over 300 on a weekend, Carolina usually wins. If they are under 300 on a weekend combined, Carolina usually loses. The one exception was the Alabama series back earlier in the season. I think they combined to go 8 for 20 in that series. So just a tick over 300, but Carolina did end up coming up short in that one. But for the most part, as long as these two guys put together a decent outing over the course of a weekend, they usually fares well for South Carolina. And I know Comolsina garnered most of the headlines. Ethan Pedri didn't have a bad week last week either, by any means. There was one game that he had the 4 strikeouts, but other than that, a solid week nonetheless. And again, they're going to be such an important part of, if Carolina is going to be able to get themselves out of this regional and advance on to a super coming up next weekend. Pitching has been such a concern for this team so many times this season. All that being said, Carolina received a couple accolades from D1 Baseball in terms of their pitching, where you have not only Garrett Gainey getting the best overall pitcher out of anybody in this regional, but Carolina was also credited with the best bullpen. And you might look at that and say, well, that's kind of surprising, but and this is not all based on the what have you done for me lately factor, but you did see that last week in Hoover, where Carolina proved when its pitching can be good, it can be really good. Now, again, some of the numbers got skewed because of the defensive inefficiencies a week ago, but when you kind of look at it from a pure eye test perspective, Carolina's pitching was pretty solid last week, and which is something that we haven't been able to say about this pitching staff for quite a while. And Carolina has the, I'd say unfortunate distinction going into this weekend of not having a true pitching plan, which is kind of what they operated on for most of the season. It's kind of been a fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing. Eli Jones was the consistent weekend starter for most of the year until the very end. And then those other spots were TBA, or you had a second guy for a week or two, like SQ. Think Pitzer jumped in there, started for a couple weeks, but it was just never anything consistent. And then at the end of the season, even Jones got moved out of the starting lineup. And last week in Hoover, it was very much pieced together, but it ended up working. And it does definitely beg the question of how you're going to go about approaching your pitching for this regional, because you do not, much like Hoover last week, you don't know how many games you're going to actually end up having to play. And unlike Hoover, where you knew after winning the first game specifically that you had a future, that there was still going to be more baseball to play a week later, that's not the case here. You have to win 3 games to get yourself out of this regional. And, again, going into the weekend, you don't know exactly how many games you're going to end up playing. Dave, let's go to yesterday's cut list if we can. I want to hit cut number 15 here. Here's Coach Kingston when he was talking with Jay and Bill on the Gamecocks Plus cocktail hour the other day, specifically about when pitchers know their roles and how they're going to approach pitching for this weekend.
And when you have a pitching staff, guys know they're starters, guys know that's the closer, guys know that's the setup man, and here's the middle relievers. This pitching staff's been a little bit unique, and it's offered some challenges of, okay, this week, this guy's a starter, but it might be a 3-inning stint in case we want to bring him back on Tuesday. Right. Or Garrett Gainey may be a closer on Friday, and if that's the case, then he won't start the rest of the weekend, and we'll bring him back on Sunday out of the bullpen again. Or you don't use him on Friday, and he's going to start on Saturday, because you either want 2 short stints out of a guy like that or 1 long start. And so that's kind of where we are as a staff. So the guys know they have some roles, but they also know be ready to be flexible.
And what he mentioned there about Garrett Gainey, who, again, D1 Baseball has dubbed as the best pitcher overall out of this entire regional, is how do you go about your approach with Garrett Gainey? Do you put him out there as your Friday starter where In the ideal scenario, he gives you maybe 5 good innings to hopefully put you in position to beat James Madison, but then you lose him for the rest of the weekend? Or do you bring him in, or do you save him as a closing option where theoretically you could get him twice over the course of the weekend, hopefully, in scenarios where maybe you have a 1-run lead, or maybe you're only down a run or so, and you still have the opportunity to win the game in the late innings, where you again, have the option to use him twice instead of once in the starting role and then be done with him. Which, again, it's a tough question to ask because he is your best pitcher and has been pitching like it for a while. And, really shouldn't have even been in position to toss the losing pitch against LSU on Saturday. If, the defense played better earlier on in the game, they would have never even gone into extra innings there. But, if it's me, I'm probably leaning towards using him as the bullpen. Now who ends up being that opener on Friday, starter, however you want to phrase it, that's a different question. But for Garrett Gainey specifically, I want to have him in my back pocket to use as many times as I can over the course of the weekend. And if that means, hey, we got a 1-run lead on JMU going into the 8th inning on Friday night, bring him out. There's your one appearance, and then if you need to use him again on Saturday or Sunday, depending on the scenario, you still have him. But I would hate to get put in a scenario where he gives you, again, the 5 good innings on Friday, and then maybe things fall apart in the bullpen, and then the rest of the weekend you don't have him, to where you're looking at those scenarios like, man, if we only had Gainey here, he could close out these final 2 innings or whatever. We feel good about winning that game, or whatever it may be. So I like that option of having in the back pocket. You have other options as far as who could be your opener for the weekend. And again, we saw several different guys go out there and pitch in that opener role last week in Hoover. And in fact, one guy who was in the starting rotation earlier on in the year, Roman Kimball, who, again, we talked about it earlier on this week, his numbers don't look great. But that is due in large part to the defensive problems that happened behind him. He should have gotten you through four innings, essentially scoreless on Saturday, on Saturday against LSU, and that didn't happen because defensive problems ended up happening behind them, and he ended up having to eat 4 of those runs. Those weren't necessarily his fault. He might have done enough to turn himself back into one of those opener roles, maybe even for tomorrow afternoon. I don't know. Coach Kingston and Matt Williams, I'm sure, are, playing out every plausible scenario and seeing what they can do to figure out who those best options are going to be this weekend. But you're going to need all hands on deck. You're going to have to use a lot of pitchers this weekend, especially if you're going to end up, even if you play the bare minimum of 3 games and win all those, you're still going to be using a lot of arms this weekend. So I'm going to be very interested to see what Coach Kingston and Matt Williams ultimately end up doing in regards to that. As I mentioned, of course, James Madison give me the first opponent coming up tomorrow. Yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. I'm getting my days confused here. Terry Ford and myself, we spoke to Connor Bergen, who is a reporter for WHSV TV out in Harrisonburg in Virginia there, covers JMU athletics. In fact, we had just gotten to Raleigh yesterday when we talked to him, gave some insight, and helped us learn a little bit more about this Dukes team that Carolina is going to be facing coming up tomorrow. We'll re-rack some of that conversation. Let's hear what he had to say yesterday on the halftime show with myself and Terry Ford. It is the Extra Point. Tyler right along with you on your Thursday, getting you set for all things regional here on The Game. Welcome back in. Here's the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on the game. Looking ahead to the regional tomorrow. Of course, James Madison, first team on the docket for South Carolina. Duke's coming in out of the Sun Belt Conference. Did not quite get to their conference championship game. Got bounced in the semis by Georgia Southern, but nevertheless still put together a impressive enough resume this season to earn one of those at-large spots and slide into this Raleigh Regional. Now, I know it's very easy to overlook some of these mid-major teams at times, especially ones that don't earn automatic qualifying bids, as they just don't play good competition. They've not seen a team like South Carolina or something along those lines. Not quite the case when it comes to this James Madison team. They're one that's actually been pretty well battle-tested. As I mentioned, Terry and myself talked to Connor Bergen from WHSV-TV out of Virginia, who does cover JMU, yesterday on the halftime show. And if we'll go with cut number 2 here, Dave, from today's list, he talked about this team being battle-tested by the amount of good opponents they played this year.
No, and you're definitely right about that. This Coach Ike has been adamant on the fact that these non-con games really mean something. And you look back at some of these games, and mind you, my first year trying to cover, I'm looking around like, okay, East Tennessee, you do your research, I'm like, oh, well, there's something there. That's actually a really competitive game. Games against Niagara, who just won their conference tournament. You add Maryland and Georgetown, Virginia Tech. They've done a great job at those midweek games, continuing to be battle-tested and be able to learn. And so when you go into tournaments like this, it really helps them, especially from a mid-major standpoint.
And he's absolutely right on that. And they weren't afraid to schedule tough opponents. They had a 4-game set with Arkansas to start off the season. Took a win there and lost one of those games by only 2 runs. Split a series or split 2 games with played Coastal Carolina as well, which is within the Sun Belt Conference. Won one of those games, then lost one in the bottom of the 13th, so that game could have gone either way. Played Louisiana, who beat Louisiana in the Sun Belt Conference tournament as well, another tournament team. And as he also mentioned there, Niagara, a team that they had played earlier on in the in a small midweek series. They split a series with them on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So a lot of good teams that ended up playing or ended up making the NCAA tournament that this JMU team has played and has beaten all of them to some degree this season. So they are no stranger to taking on tough opponents, and they themselves have some pretty good players on their team, as you would expect for any team that does make the tournament. And the player that stands out more than any is definitely Fenwick Trimble, their star center fielder. Here is what Connor Bergen had to say, cut number 6 here, Dave, about Fenwick Trimble and what he brings to the table for this Dukes team.
5-tool athlete. That's the easy way to be able to answer it. He does a little bit of everything. Great pop in his bat. He's having a career year. The power numbers were a little down in the Sun Belt tournament, but I wouldn't be very worrisome about that. I think that he has continued to be a catalyst in their success, coming up big in all situations. I mean, he is somebody that I think a lot of people are going to take note of when they see him more on a national stage.
Looking at his numbers, leads team in batting average at .371, hit 14 home runs on the season. That does not lead the team, by the way. Really good slugging percentage of .638, OPS of 1.092. So a guy that gets on base quite a bit, and again, kind of the leading force when it comes to this James Madison team and what they are able to do offensively. He's had hits in 3 of his last 6 games, so on a little bit, I don't want to say of a rough patch, but has cooled off a little bit in these past couple games, but did go 4 of 5 with 4 RBIs against Old Dominion in their conference tournament just a couple of games ago. So still very capable of hitting the ball really, really well. And now he's not the only one on the team that can get the ball well. They do have some other heavy hitters on this James Madison team. I mentioned he does not lead the team in home runs. That is actually Jason Schiavone, who is their catcher, with 18 home runs on the season. Brendan O'Donnell, the right fielder, also has 16 himself. He hits the ball a pretty good clip at .313 out there in right field. Pretty good on base percentage as well for him at .401. So again, a lot of bats in this offense, and it's one of those things where this could be another one of those high scoring games. And again, Carolina got in quite a few of those last week. Unfortunately, coming up short in those games against LSU, but we know Carolina's offense is certainly capable, and we will see how capable the offense of James Madison is going up against South Carolina's pitching staff, which again has had holes in it this year. So there's no reason to think why they, certainly couldn't score some runs on this South Carolina team. But speaking of the Dukes and their pitching staff, let's take a look. Or from Connor Bergen's perspective on the ups and downs this pitching staff has had this year for JMU. Cut number 3 here, Dave.
Well, I think every game may be kind of a shootout in terms of scoring. Right now, the starting pitching has been, as Coach Eikenberry said, it's by committee at the moment. Donovan Burke was the most reliable starter throughout the year. He had a couple little hiccups at the end of the regular season, but seemed to be turning it around at the end of the conference tournament. So the starting rotations had some struggles here and there, but the bullpen has continued to be almost locked down. I mean, they had a very impressive tournament performance, especially when you got 2 or 3 guys, Jackson Logar and T.R. Williams and Todd Mizuki, who were making 3-4 inning appearances. And when you also have setup and closer Hunter Ensminger and Joe Bogotsky, who have done a really solid job at holding the back end and holding those 1-run leads. Like I said, this team is known to be able to put up 8 or 9 or 10 runs at any given day. It's just going to be a matter of who's on the pitcher's mound, really. It's any game could be a wild card with pitching, but it seems as if their past couple games they've started to finally kind of find who's there, who isn't, and they're continuing to grow.
And like you mentioned, this could be a game that ends up being a shootout because the pitching has been a little bit up and down this season. And again, you feel like South Carolina's offense is capable of taking advantage of a pitching staff that may not be certainly at the top of its game. When you look at the numbers that they bring in, they have the highest batting average allowed in all of the Sun Belt Conference, and a 6.01 staff ERA. So again, those numbers do certainly benefit South Carolina in a lot of ways, and hopefully we see the likes of Messina and Petrie and Reeves and even Blake Jackson, who had a great conference tournament as well, take advantage of that and be able to drive some runs in that can help South Carolina outpace what again is a pretty solid JMU offense. And one thing in particular, when we talk about this team, James Madison's making their first NCAA tournament appearance since 2011. This is not a team that has a rich history of tournament success in college baseball. In fact, Coach Eikenberry, who's in his 9th season at JMU, has never been to the NCAA tournament before. So a lot of newness for this squad. And that can be very dangerous. You know what I mean? Because when you look at it from the perspective of South Carolina, the pressure's on for them, right? Like they're a program that's expected to be in this situation. They're a fan base here that looks at them going to a super regional last year, says, okay, well, you should probably be getting back to Omaha this next upcoming year. So that pressure is on South Carolina. JMU's not playing with that. JMU is I don't want to say playing carefree, but it is looking at this with more of a smile on their face, I think, than South Carolina is, because nobody expected them to be there. They were picked towards the bottom of the barrel in the Sun Belt Conference this year, and they proved a lot of people wrong. And obviously they want to go deep in the tournament, but there's a carefreeness to a team like James Madison that can be very dangerous because they're just going to throw the kitchen sink at it. You know what I mean? And Brandon, Connor mentioned to us yesterday that Coach Eikenberry, not the most analytical guy in the world, very old school baseball. So what does that mean for South Carolina and how he manages this game? I don't know. But I would be weary of a team like James Madison and what they can do, kind of not having the same amount of pressure on them as a team like South Carolina does going into this regional up there in Raleigh. So we'll see what happens. Again, a first pitch coming up tomorrow at 2 o'clock, pregame coverage starting at 1:45. The host of this regional is none other than the NC State Wolfpack. We'll get some perspective on them, assuming South Carolina is going to see them at some point this weekend, from Noah Fleischman, who writes for the Wolfpacker, the On3 site for North Carolina State. That's coming up next. We'll speak to him. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Thursday morning, getting you set for regional action here on the game. Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on this Thursday. I always appreciate our friends over at Georgia Pacific, and I always enjoy talking hardwood as we get set for regional action. Carolina heading up the road today to take on, or to the Raleigh Regional up there in North Carolina State for regional action, starting off with JMU coming up tomorrow. At some point this weekend, probably going to see the North Carolina State Wolfpack as the host. Joining me now on Love Chevrolet phone lines from the Wolfpack, or the On3 site for NC State, is Noah Fleischman. Noah, first of all, appreciate your time this morning. I remember talking to you right at a year ago when NC State was coming down here to Columbia for the regional. Now the shoe on the other foot a bit. What's the vibe up there in Raleigh about getting to host this year?
Yeah, no, the vibe is great. The first time hosting since 2018, they're excited and they're happy to, have some quality teams coming into Raleigh, and it's going to be a fun time, starting today with some practices and getting ready to go tomorrow afternoon.
Of course, with being a national seed, the 10th overall national seed, of course, NC State, one of the best teams in the country. Looking at how their season ended, they did have a quick exit of 2 games in the ACC tournament last week. But when you look at their final 8 games in conference play, 6-2 overall, all of those against ranked opponents, including a clean sweep of Wake Forest in the final week of the regular season, truly feels like NC State playing its best baseball right there towards the end of this regular season.
Yeah, it is. They won 5 ranked series this year in conference play. They really turned it around. I mean, they got swept by Georgia Tech, swept by Louisville early in the year when they were battling some injury and illness. But ever since then, they've beat the teams they need to beat and have probably one of the best resumes in college baseball, which got them a national seed to host this weekend. But, yeah, beating Wake Forest the way they did. I mean, Chase Burns, the best pitcher in college baseball, struck out 13. NC State was still able to find a way to win the game. And that's kind of been the theme of this year, but also – their bullpen is probably one of the best in the country right now with how they're playing. Their numbers might not speak that with their ERAs and things like that, but the last month and a half, their freshmen and sophomores out there have been pitching really, really well.
So the star of this team, I want to make sure I get his name right, Alec Makarowicz. Did I say that correctly? Makarowicz. Okay, I'm probably going to mess it up a few more times, but regardless, he catches my attention because he wears the number 99. You have to be a badass in baseball if you wear the number 99, and his numbers certainly reflect that. But he transferred over from Eastern Carolina, and looking at his numbers there, respectable, but I don't know if anybody was expecting him to pop off the way that he did this season.
Yeah, no, he's played really, really good baseball for him all year. He leads the team in average and home runs and RBI. He's the guy that gets it done. And he plays really good defense at third, too. He's made some great plays over there on the corner. So he's a guy that they brought in to kind of, take a step defensively at least. And the bat came along with it, and they're not going to complain about it at all. So he's been a really key part of this offense and has played well the entire year. He leads the country in total active games played by a college baseball player. And so he's played a lot of baseball, and he's shown it this year of what that can turn into. Again,
talking to Noah Fleischman from the Wolfpacker of On3, previewing NC State for this weekend's upcoming regional. Outside of him, who are some other names to know from the offense for this team?
Yeah, Garrett Pennington on first base. He transferred from Wichita State. He's a guy who started his career at the Division II level in the Midwest, and he came with a big bat. That was kind of the resume on him, and he's really powered them too in the 2 spot. And then you can look at a guy like Jacob Cozart, one of the best defensive catchers in all of college baseball. He's hitting the ball well right now. He'll probably hear his name called in the first 90 picks of the MLB draft this summer. So they've got some guys that are swinging the bat well, and then you go down the order. You get to the bottom of the order, it's a lot of guys that can get on base, but Alex Sosa is the freshman DH who earlier this year battled mono, batted the flu right after. He went 0 for 37 when he came back, and now he's just hitting the ball really, really well. He's got like 4 homers in those last 7 games. He's been a key part of this offense down the stretch, and will have to be big this weekend if they want to win this region.
Looking at things from the pitching perspective, numbers pretty respectable overall in terms of the ACC, but it seems like this is a pitching staff that's been plagued by injuries throughout the season. Where does that stand right now, and what arms are we going to be expecting to see this weekend?
Yeah, they've battled injury and illness all year. I mean, they lost Matt Willitson, their Saturday starter, on the first day of practice to a torn UCL, and they lost Shane Van Dam during the year, their best reliever, to another torn UCL. And then starter-wise, Sam Highfield is the ace. He'll probably, be seen. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with him, whether they pitch him Friday night against Bryant or hold him for that Saturday game to advance in the winner's bracket if they get to it. So he pitches well. And then Dom Fritton is a sophomore starter that's pitched pretty well throughout his time at NC State. And then Logan Whitaker, Sunday guy. He is a guy who missed 6 starts this year with a throat illness and ended up losing 30 pounds. He came back. He's thrown well. So they've got 3 starters that are really good. And then in the bullpen, it's really freshmen and sophomores getting it done. Jacob Duden throws up to 99 miles an hour. They've got 2 long relievers that are freshmen that can give them 4 or 5 innings if they need it out of the bullpen. And then Derek Smith is a lights-out closer that when he goes out there, it hits 96, 97. He struck out the side to clinch the sweep over Wake Forest. So he's a guy that's more than capable in high-leverage situations as well.
As you mentioned, they will open up with Bryant tomorrow night, who comes in as the 4 seed, winning the American East. And I talked about this in the last segment. Carolina gets JMU, and JMU is a team that hasn't been in this tournament in over 10 years. Definitely, not want to say playing with house money, but one that wasn't expected to be here, that maybe is playing a little bit more loose and a little bit more free, where now you have NC State taking on Bryant. What have you uncovered from looking into this Bryant team? What's your scouting report from this game that we're going to see tomorrow night between those 2 teams?
Yeah, it's actually similar to a team like JMU that's here as well. I mean, they hit the ball really well. Pitching is average. It's okay, but they rely on their offense to beat you, and it's going to be an interesting matchup. We'll see. I'm kind of curious to see what NC State decides to throw tomorrow night, if they want to throw their ace in Sam Highfield to get them a win, or if they go to the bullpen early on to save some arms and get ready for the weekend. So it'll be interesting, but Bryant's a team that hits the ball well. They had 80-1 homers this year, which is a program record, 3 guys with double-figure home runs. So they hit the ball well. We'll see what happens tomorrow night, and then we'll see what happens tomorrow afternoon, too, at South Carolina and JMU, because I think it'll be a good game, probably a close one, to get it started off.
Well, I was going to say, I was listening to your conversation with our guy, Jack Feltry from Gamecock Central earlier on this week. You actually previously covered James Madison, so you're very familiar with the Dukes program.
Yeah, I spent a couple of years up there and covering them. They're a good program. Yeah, it's their first time in the tournament in quite some time. Their whole coaching staff's first time in the tournament. I mean, they only have 1 player on their roster that has played in the regional. So they're really new, to this time. But they're playing, with the sense of they're here and they're going to have fun with it. And we'll see what happens. They're definitely a more than capable team. They beat Arkansas in Fayetteville earlier this year, so we'll see what happens. I don't think playing an SEC team or playing an ACC team is gonna bother them too much.
Looking back on the history between these 2 teams, South Carolina and NC State, when it comes to postseason play, the last time Carolina made a trip up to Raleigh for a regional, all the way back in 2008, I believe Russell Wilson would have been on that team, actually, funny enough. Doak Field, smaller, more intimate venue. I know only about 3,000 seats there. A lot of Carolina fans weren't able to get their hands on any tickets. What can we expect from an environment standpoint this weekend up there in Raleigh?
It's going to be lively. Anytime NC State hits the field here, it's packed crowd, standing room only. I expect the same, this weekend, anytime the Wolfpack is on the field. And I bet some NC State fans will show up to, tomorrow afternoon's game again, for South Carolina to see who they'll play. But yeah, that 2008 regional is kind of funny because JMU was the 3 seed in that regional, and then Charlotte was here as well. So, a lot of shades of 2008, and you look at who, this region was paired in 2008 was paired with Athens, Georgia, and that's who they're paired with again this year. So it's all kind of coming back to that year.
I was going to say, history is always doomed to repeat itself, right?
Exactly.
All right, we appreciate your time, Noah. Certainly looking forward to the baseball this weekend and seeing who comes out of the regional on top.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Again, that is Noah Flashman, who covers NC State baseball for the Wolfpacker on 3. And again, they will take on Bryant coming up tomorrow afternoon, or after South Carolina and JMU play in game number 1 up there at Doak Field in Raleigh. And Wes and I were talking about this yesterday, that it does not seem like a lot of Carolina fans were able to get their hands on those tickets as, again, smaller, more intimate video at 3,000 seats up there at Doak Field. So definitely going to be a lot of NC State fans there, probably dominating the contingent in the stands over the course of the weekend. So we'll see what happens. Certainly looking forward to it. And again, all of it gets started tomorrow afternoon with Carolina and JMU at 2 o'clock right here on the game. Real quick, want to remind you about the craft beer card. It is back. Go online to 1075thegame.com and click on the Sweet Deals tab. You can purchase yourself a craft beer card or purchase it for somebody else. Hey, Father's Day is coming up here in just a couple weeks. Can't think of a better gift for Dad than maybe a craft beer card. It is a $360 value that can be all yours for just $79. Go online to 1075thegame.com, click on Sweet Deals tab, and purchase the craft beer card. The SEC spring meetings are ongoing this week, hearing from a lot of different, not only coaches, but also athletic directors as well out there in Destin. One athletic director in particular is boasting about his team's rivalry being one of the best in the SEC. Are we ready to say that yet, though, about a team that's just, or two teams that are just joining the conference? I'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Thursday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, wrapping up today's edition of the show. Wes Mitchell will jump here with me coming up next for the Garnet Trust Hour. We'll have plenty more baseball conversation there. But as I mentioned a moment ago, the SEC spring meeting's ongoing down there in Destin, Florida. And this being a very important one, as this is the first real instance of Texas and Oklahoma being a part of the SEC before they officially become members, July 1st of this year, before taking part in this upcoming football season. Now, typically, when you talk about conference realignment, when a school joins a new conference, there's almost this sense of, hey, come in, sit down, shut up, and learn your place before you start going around, trying to act like you're some kind of big shot, right? Well, Texas and Oklahoma are a little bit of a different animal. Two programs that you would consider blue bloods of college football that are not afraid to be loud and boisterous about what they bring to the table in the SEC. And I heard a comment be made on the Paul Feinbaum show yesterday by Texas athletic director Chris Del Conte that I think kind of perfectly exemplifies the brashness that both Texas and Oklahoma are bringing into the SEC, where they are not afraid to pound their chest about who they are and what they believe they're going to mean to the conference. And especially when you talk about the Red River rivalry, which is the conference, which will now become a conference game played out there at the Cotton Bowl at the State Fair in Texas. And cut number 17 here, Dave. Chris Del Conte thinks this might be one of the, if not the best rivalries in all the SEC now.
Have you been to the Red River rivalry yet?
At the beginning of my career, I saw it.
It's ridiculous. It's the greatest thing ever. You may talk about the cocktail party, the Iron Bowl. It is nothing
I like where this is going. I think
at the State Fair, because you have 300,000
I detected something there.
300,000 people outside. No, the Iron Bowl is awesome. Don't get me wrong. At night, it's great. Same with but the cocktail party. But this game, is nuts too. You got to throw us a bone there, P-Dub. What's up, buddy?
Joe, the University of Texas is not even an official member yet of the SEC, and he's already throwing shade on the Iron Bowl. The Iron Bowl.
No.
You'll be fine because we're not even allowed to call it the cocktail party.
When your callers come in losing their mind, I was not throwing shade. What I was saying, it is an unbelievable environment.
Oh, man.
So you're already throwing a little sauce on that for no reason.
This is like, you've given me a gift.
This is not right.
Oh, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Come on now.
Come on.
All I was saying was it's an awesome game that you give. You talk about it.
And as you would expect, a lot of people only taking part of that clip and running with it as if he was saying that it is the best rivalry in the SEC, which is not necessarily what he's saying. But I will say it is definitely a newer thing for somebody to come into the conference and lay claim to having one of the better rivalries in your conference right out the gate. And, I mean, he's not wrong necessarily. Texas and Oklahoma do have a rich history with each other. The Cotton Bowl venue that they play in every year is very unique and very special. One of the very few neutral site games, annual games at least, with the conference opponents that we still have left in college football. We of course have Georgia, Florida. We have OU and Texas. Obviously Army and Navy, Texas A&M and Arkansas. That might be it. Maybe I'm forgetting one or two, but I believe those are all the neutral site regular season games that we have on an annual basis between teams that see each other every single year. And where does it rank? I think is a good question. And now, yes, we've not seen this game in the context of being in the SEC yet, where we'll have a SEC logo at the 25-yard line as opposed to the Big 12 logo in years past. But I mean, I really think it's probably going to slot somewhere in the top three, right? We would probably all agree that the Iron Bowl is the end-all, be-all of probably the best overall, most significant rivalry in the SEC. Can make an argument Georgia, Florida maybe makes a run for number two. And I'm talking about specifically conference versus conference opponents. I'm not talking about where Carolina plays Clemson out of conference or Florida plays Florida State. I'm talking about specific conference versus conference opponents. Auburn and Georgia have the Deep South oldest rivalry. That's in the conversation. LSU and Alabama, that's turned into a really big thing over the past couple of decades. But, I mean, again, I don't think Chris Del Conte is necessarily wrong that Texas is probably making a solid argument for being in the top three. I don't know if I am ready to unseat the Iron Bowl just yet. We'll see what Kalen DeBoer makes Alabama to become for years to come. And if Hugh Freeze can get Auburn to being that perennial contender year in, year out, which adds even more stakes to that rivalry as if it needs more. But Texas and Oklahoma, for one, I'm very glad they're in the conference. Like, I'm not anti, expansion here. Like, I'm very glad these two teams are coming into the conference. And, as talked about yesterday, they're not coming in to be a middle tier. They're coming in to be at the top. Texas has a very good shot at being at the top. Oklahoma, a lot of questions about the team going in this year, but if they ended up being a top 5 team in the SEC this year, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm surprised by that. You know what I mean? And it's a very unique thing because typically teams come in, like when Missouri and A&M came in, over a decade ago, people kind of expected them to be in the middle tier. A&M had a surprising first year, and then Missouri ends up winning the SEC East 2 years in a row after that. But, overall, I would say Oklahoma and Texas, they're going to make their presence known very, very quickly. And a part of that is going to be with the Red River rivalry now being a SEC contest as opposed to a Big 12 contest. And I think it'd be a fun game to go to. State Fair, like I said, 300,000 people out there, an old classic venue like the Cotton Bowl. Like, if you gave me tickets to it today, I would be there tomorrow. You know what I mean? So it'd be interesting to see how the collective whole of SEC accepts it as the years go by. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next, it is the Garnet Trust Hour. Myself and Wes Mitchell will have more baseball conversation. Also dive into some new things in terms of sponsorship in college football. What's on the horizon and what is next? That is all coming up on the Garnet Trust Hour here on The Game. It's 8 o'clock on your Thursday morning. Welcome in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell hanging out with you here on this Thursday. We'll get into more baseball conversation coming up in just a little bit here. Going to be joined by a writer for JMU Sports, and Katie Harper coming up in a few minutes. Jack Beltrust going to check in with us a little bit later on in the hour. But, of course, as we like to talk about NIL-related things quite a bit here on the Garnet Trust Hour, I want to start off with this, Wes. This report coming out yesterday from Ross Dellinger, who, I mean, he's got to be a professor at this point when it comes to NIL and these kind of related things in college football.
He's my man crush for like national reporters.
Yeah.
Literally, when On3 was hiring national people, I was like, hey, we should hire this guy.
Right.
Ross is sourced up, I would say, especially when it comes to now, he's gotten into all the NIL stuff, but on the SEC side,
Oh, yeah.
like my man's got the goods. So anytime he speaks, I listen, and he actually does a great job of taking what has become legalese in sports and putting it in a way you can digest it.
I would say he dumbs it down for all
That's
of us. He does
very valuable.
Does a really good job of it. The latest thing that he reported on yesterday is that we could be seeing more sponsorship and commercialization coming in college football in the way of things like on-the-field advertisements as well as jersey patches. And you and I were talking about this before we went on the air here. I'm surprised it's taken this long, to be honest with you. This is something that I thought when NIL went live in the summer of 2021, I thought this was going to be one of the first things to happen. Now, there's been kind of, I don't want to say necessarily hard in the line rules, but there's been I'd say discouragement through the NCAA about doing this over the years. But of course, that landscape is shifting, and especially when we're talking about, this potential $22 million cap that teams are going to have to pay their athletes, they're going to be welcoming in revenue streams of any kind, and potentially welcoming in sponsorship in this way is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, and I've thought this was going to be on the way for quite some time, and I think if you look at this in the most simple of terms, you're going to have to split this pie with more people, and a huge part of that is obviously going to be the athletes and revenue share and whatever you want to call it. Point is, some of those dollars that were coming in that were going mainly to coaches, facilities, infrastructure, that's going to have to now go to the players. So in order to keep running basically this business, you're going to have to then bring in more money. And frankly, the boosters themselves, a lot of them are at the point of being tapped. And so, I think for South Carolina, for really, and really I think if you're looking at it from a Carolina perspective, was there a rule before that said you couldn't do this? I guess there was.
Yeah, and again, I don't necessarily know if it was black and white, because sponsorships of athletic programs is not a new thing. We see, so-and-so product be the official whatever of Carolina sports or what have you, but we've never seen it translate into something that you actually see on the field or on the uniforms when you watch on a Saturday, and that's kind of the area that we're working towards. Now, for those, before you start freaking out, no, that does not mean there's going to be 20 ads on, the field at Williams-Brice Stadium. It will be limited to things like the 25-yard line, one on each one, or something along those lines. Maybe an ad on the sidelines, in the out-of-bounds area or something along those lines. Then a jersey patch as well. So it'd be minimal, but it's something that would definitely be noticeable.
Well, let's be honest, fans are going to hate this.
Sure,
it's going to be something they complain about. I don't know if they really care a ton about the one on the field, but the second you put the patch on, I mean, even with professional athletics, I've seen the reactions to the Braves having the yellow patch on their jersey.
Yep.
People hate it, but
you get used to it.
And it's honestly, it's just going to have to be a fact of life at this point. You can't turn those dollars down. And the reason I brought up South Carolina too is saying, and was there a rule beforehand? Everybody's going to be doing it. So
of course,
but really, you're looking. Where can I find an advantage? Where can I find a way to create money that my opponent is not?
And I thought it was interesting that Ross kind of delved into some of the numbers of what these potential ad spots could be worth based on the people that he talked to within the industry. And he said that, a spot on the 25-yard line, probably going to run around $1 million annually to be on a jersey or to be the jersey patch, on the football team or whatever, probably somewhere around $5 million annually. And again, you're getting a spot on every single jersey of the 80 to 100 guys that are on the team. But I think that value probably varies differently depending on what team we're talking about, because buying a spot at Vanderbilt on their 25-yard line, much different than trying to get it at Bryant-Denny Stadium or something along those lines. So the value of your team and of what your program is and has been is going to matter a lot in terms of these dollar numbers and what you're going to be able to bring in from these sponsors.
Yeah, for sure. And, I mean, I guess you use the MLB kind of as your guide there, but I don't even know how you price what something like that is worth at this point. Like when you consider this patch is going to be seen. So a lot of times when you're talking about advertising, of course, you're talking about impressions, especially in the world of digital advertising. Well, hey, if you pay for this ad, it's going to be seen 10,000 times, and you're paying however much money per. A lot of times you pay per thousand,
right?
And so online might be you pay $10 or $15 per 1,000 impressions. Well, a patch on your actual uniform, that's going to be seen, obviously, in person.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be seen on TV. It's going to be seen on every photo that's ever posted if it has the right angle of that jersey. So I don't even know how you start to judge what the number of impressions would be. And then the other side of it will be if you're the University of South Carolina, for example, finding businesses that you have some connections with that can actually afford and that it makes sense for them to spend $5 million a year to be your jersey sponsor, because this ain't going to be, the mom and pop restaurant in Columbia. It's going to be major corporations.
But I think about it from this perspective, and this is why I thought this was something that was going to come to, see the light of day several years ago when NIL became a thing. Think about the passion that college fans have, particularly in the SEC, for their respective universities. And again, we love the Braves, we love professional teams, but it's not quite like the connection that you have to a place that you went to school at or something that you have a connection with like college football. Let's say that Firehouse Subs became the official jersey patch for Carolina football, $5 million, whatever it may be, and you see that patch on the jersey every time Carolina football is out there on the field. I can only imagine the amount of people that, may have not cared about Firehouse Subs beforehand, but they say, hey, guess what? They support my program, my university. Guess what? I'm going to start eating at Firehouse Subs. And the return on investment and the local connection you make by doing that, I imagine, is very beneficial.
It would be, and hopefully everybody here already eats Firehouse Subs, Tyler.
Well, that's our job for getting to do that.
Yeah, so, but yeah, I think you just have to have... You have to have a big enough company that, for one, you can just spend $5 million in the first place, but two, that you're not going to just blow your entire budget. Like it has to be worth it for you financially to do that. But for companies that operate at a big enough scale, then yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense. And you just got to find a lot of times those CEOs and owners that also are, USC grad, a Clemson grad for Clemson, a Florida grad for Florida, because I feel like there's also, when you advertise with the schools, there's a little bit of, yes, return on investment, but there's a little bit of emotion involved in that. There's a little bit of, that's where I'm from. I want to support them while simultaneously helping my business, I think.
If I'm Oregon State, I'm calling Buc-ee's like today, trying to work this out.
Yes.
It makes perfect sense.
For sure. For sure.
What would be what's the most South Carolina thing that we think could make its way onto the field at Williams-Brice or onto a jersey patch?
Other than obviously Firehouse. That's our answer. Cheerwine.
That's a good one. Drink of the Carolinas.
That's a good Firehouse Subs text line question, actually.
803-404-6100. What is the most Carolina thing that could end up at the 25-yard line or on a jersey patch for the Gamecocks? And again, this is something that we knew was going to probably come eventually. And now that the wheels are really turning on this new shift in landscape of college football, where I mean, essentially, it's pro sports. Let's call it what it is. It's going to be pro sports at this point in time, with players getting paid and now bringing corporations to the table in this new way. Like, it's just the reality we're going to have to get used to. But I bring up, what you said about, like, the Braves. When Quikrete became the jersey patch on the arm sleeve for the Braves. And people were freaking out about it. Oh, my God, it looks ugly. I hate it, blah, 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 blah. After, a couple weeks, people stopped talking about it. It kind of became an accepted thing. And, yeah, you notice it, obviously, but it doesn't change your perspective on how you watch the game anymore.
I still think it's borderline insane that FTX was the umpire sponsor. And then, I mean, so clearly, you need to make sure you do your homework on what company you're accepting dollars from as well.
Sure. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't always work out.
Like, that was always the weirdest sponsorship anyway. I'm like, FTX and Major League Baseball, like, that doesn't even feel like the same people. You know what I'm saying? Like, people who are all into crypto are not the same people sitting there watching 9 innings of baseball.
Not usually. So, did FTX go under?
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, they...
Well, as most crypto does.
Well, okay. All right. We won't go into that. But, their founder is, like, fighting jail time at this point.
See, I don't get into all the crypto stuff. I just figured if they were crypto, they probably went under.
Okay.
But anyways.
We got a great guest coming up, Tyler.
We do. We'll jump back in the baseball conversation. Katie Harper of Daily News and Record Sports going to join us coming up next. Give us her thoughts on the JMU Dukes as South Carolina gets set to take them on in the Raleigh Regional tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock right here on the Game. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler West Mitchell on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour here on the game. Title head Wes Mitchell along with you. Of course, getting set for regional action coming up tomorrow afternoon where South Carolina will take on the Dukes of James Madison in the first game up in Raleigh. 2 o'clock first pitch. Pregame coverage starting at 1:45 right here on the game. Here to give us more insight into the JMU program, Katie Harper from Daily News and Record Sports. Katie, first of all, appreciate your time this morning. You know, when I look at this JMU team, I draw some comparisons to South Carolina basketball this past year, where nobody gave them a chance going into the season, picked very low in their respective conference standings, and then really went out there and proved a lot of people wrong and made their way into the tournament for the first time in a while.
They really did. And again, thanks for having me on to talk about them. Entering the season, they had one guy that was on the preseason All-Sun Belt list, and they were projected to finish 10th. And it's kind of been a long history of this baseball team being down and no one really expecting much out of them. And then, especially at the start of this year, they raced off to a hot start in non-conference play and then kind of carried it into the Sun Belt play.
Hey, Katie, it's Wes. I appreciate you doing this. And I guess for our listeners who maybe haven't had a reason to watch much of JMU this year or haven't watched them at all, what would you say is kind of the identity of this team this year in terms of, are they more offensive-oriented, more pitching-oriented? Just maybe give our listeners here a little bit of a broad view of kind of what they've been able to do successfully in order to get to this point.
Yeah, they're going to be an offensive team. Their pitching could be at times one of the most interesting things you will see on a baseball field. But when it comes to putting up runs, their offense can put up a ton of them. They've shared throughout the season that they're very confident in their ability to not just put up runs consistently, to do it late into games too. Even if they get down, it happened in the Sun Belt tournament where they went down 7-1 to Louisiana in an elimination game, and that was the 1 seed. And they came back in the 7th, 8th, and 9th and won it 10-9. So they can put up runs. A lot of the times they need to put up a good amount of runs in case the pitching kind of gets away from them. But with guys like Fenwick Trimble and Mike Mancini, they're going to score runs and they're going to run the bases pretty well too.
Well, it's funny, Carolina has had its own problems with pitching this season, so you're telling me we should probably end up taking the over for this game tomorrow?
Yeah, probably.
Again, talking to Katie Harper, getting some insight into JMU before tomorrow's regional game up there in Raleigh. And you mentioned, beating Louisiana in the Sun Belt tournament last week. This is a JMU team that's played a lot of really good teams this year. They played Arkansas to start off the season, took a win from them, played the likes of Louisiana, played a Niagara team that also made the NCAA tournament as well. Like, they've played some really good opponents this year and picked up wins against a lot of them as well. Like, I know we can kind of look at a team that comes in without, being an AQ like JMU was and think they're just not battle tested, but this team has very much played good competition this year.
They have, and it's something that their head coach, Marlon Eichenberry, is really proud of. And he said it to us the other day that, he's not scared to go out there and schedule an SEC team to play against, especially early in the season, because at times he knows that being in the Sun Belt, you may not win that conference tournament, so you may need to build that strong resume to get this chance into a regional. And he's very proud of this year's schedule. The two Niagara games were actually some of the ones that he's most proud of, to get them down in a midweek series and be able to face what he called a really good pitching staff from them was definitely an early test and they've won quite a bit of their non-conference games. And I know for a lot of us in the media up here in Harrisonburg, leading into that 4-game Arkansas stretch, a lot of our conversations were around if they can just somehow take one. And they did. And on top of that, they were run ruled once, but for the most part, that was a good series for them where they hung in it sometimes. They got up early in the first game. So there's some confidence behind these guys.
Katie, have they announced a starting pitcher for tomorrow yet?
They have not. After covering this team for the entire season, my best guess would probably be Donovan Burke is going to be the go-to guy for the first game. We did get it out of Marlon Eichenberry the other day that freshman Jackson Logar will probably start at one point because of what he was able to do in the conference tournament. So those are kind of the two guys that are being tossed around the most, but Donovan Burke has been probably their most consistent starter throughout the entirety of the season, and he's an older guy and brings quite a bit of experience with him.
Yeah, I'm seeing in the release here, Burke has 6 wins on the season, 61 strikeouts, has pitched 84 innings. So like you said, an experienced guy, has been there for them. Anything more you can tell us about Burke and just sort of his pitching style or what makes him successful?
So the thing about Burke is guys are going to get on base against him. They may get a single. He may hit a batter or two. But the thing that I think has really kind of set him apart at times is that once a base runner gets on, there's a very high chance that he can pick them off at first. So before they can even get a chance at advancing, they're already heading back to the dugout. He's really, really tricky with that. He's a lefty, and he has probably one of the best pickoff moves that a lot of us have seen. His head coach talks about it all the time, that it's one of the best in the country. And then on top of that, Burke has the benefit of having a pretty good defense around him too. So even when runners get on, with his ability to pick off, they're already going to be a little bit skeptical on stealing. And then on top of that, he has a backstop in Jason Schiavone, who led the Sun Belt this year and caught runners.
Looking at things from an offensive standpoint, Fenwick Trimble kind of garners the headlines, leads the team in a lot of offensive categories. D1 Baseball actually had him as the most exciting player of this entire regional. But outside of him, who are some other names we're going to be looking out for JMU offensively tomorrow?
Some of the bigger ones I would say is if a Mike Mancini gets on base, he's the one you're going to want to keep an eye on. He had 34 stolen base attempts, and he stole 29 successfully. So he's a lot of fun to watch once he's on the base path. I've kind of said it a few times throughout the season that for some reason, Wyatt Pfeiffer, he's kind of in the middle of the lineup. He is almost about as automatic as you can get. If there are bases loaded and he comes up to the plate, he has gone 2 or 3 times with a bases clearing double. So he can connect on some pretty big hits. And he's also one of those players too that can really work a pitcher for a long at bat. And even if he ends up getting out, it's 10, 11 pitches that it takes to get him there. And then on top of that, Ryan Dooley will most likely be their leadoff guy, and he's been their leadoff guy for most of the season. And, you know, he doesn't have a ton of home runs. He had a pretty big one in the Sun Belt tournament against Louisiana, but he's someone that quite often will just get on base right away and kind of set Fenwick Trimble up for something.
Again, we're joined by Katie Harper here talking about JMU, South Carolina's opponent for the regional tomorrow. Katie, what was the vibe like as JMU learned that they were indeed in? I was reading some of y'all's content and how, it was not a sure thing that they were going to be selected for the tournament. I got to imagine, obviously, there's excitement, but do you think this program is kind of playing a little bit with house money and that they probably feel like there's really nothing to lose at this point? You're probably not going to be picked to beat a South Carolina. I imagine you kind of take that us against the world type approach if you're in that locker room.
Yeah, they're definitely all really excited. I think kind of after leaving the Sun Belt tournament, there were points heading into it where they felt that maybe if they won 1 or 2 games in the tournament, they should be all good. And then they get out of it, and for the next 24 hours, they're sitting there looking at these projections that are saying, nah, they're going to be one of the first 4 out. So they're excited to be in. And I think covering them all season, we've seen it with them that they don't really listen to the outside noise too much. They're not paying a ton of attention to what people said about them. They didn't pay a ton of attention to being picked to finish 10th in the conference. They've just kind of gone about their business and stuck with their approach throughout the entirety of the season. And I think that's kind of what I'm seeing from them now is they're not too focused on maybe what people expect from them out of the regional. They're just going to go in and play the style of baseball that they've been playing all year that's gotten them to this moment.
And last one for you here. How do they view this regional as a whole, especially when you look at a team like South Carolina that, again, has a history of winning national championships and has made a lot of trips to Omaha themselves? NC State went to Omaha a couple years ago and is obviously hosting the thing as a national seed. How do they view, kind of where they stack up in terms of the opponents that they're going up against this weekend?
I think they feel pretty good and okay about it. And I think a lot of that goes back to the schedule that they played this season. And there's some common opponents there between, teams playing Georgia Southern, Arkansas. So they know that there's at least something to kind of judge themselves off of. But for the most part, I think there's just kind of a lot of excitement for them going into this regional that I don't think it would have really mattered what teams they were playing. They were just excited to get back. And I know with a bunch of the fifth-year guys, this is their last shot, and it's actually being played in Raleigh, which is where they all started their college career. So I think for them right now, they were aware of the teams that they were getting ready to play, and they were definitely looking at those common opponents. But I think this was a team that was just like, get us in and we can figure it out and how we can play against these teams then.
Well, Katie, we're certainly excited to see what happens tomorrow. We appreciate your time and your insight this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
Again, that is Katie Harper giving us some insight into James Madison ahead of tomorrow's matchup with the Gamecocks. Again, first pitch at 2 o'clock, pregame coverage starting at 1:45 here on the game. We'll talk to our guy, Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, coming up next, get his thoughts as he gets set to head up to Raleigh for the regional this weekend. That's coming up next. It is the Garnet Trust Tower, Tyler West Mitchell, along with you on this Thursday on the game.
All right, everybody, let me tell you about our friends over at Classic Roofing. Check them out, classicroofingsc.com, or just give them a call today, 803-590-7870. My buddies Joe Reeder, Max Sawyer, they're going to take great care of you and your roof. They've got a wealth of experience spanning more than 20 years. Their team of experts is well equipped to handle any and all of your roofing requirements. That could be just a residential project there at your house. If you're a business owner, that could be a commercial undertaking, or really that could be anything big or small in between. They have got you covered. Obviously, if you own your home or a business, your roof is one of the absolute most important parts that you want to make sure is taken care of. Let them come out, do a free estimate on your roof, and let you know how much life that roof has left so that you can plan for future repairs. Set that up, classicroofingsc.com, or call them today, 803-590-7870.
Welcome back in, Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, along with you on this Thursday, talking all things regional as the Gamecocks will get set sometime today to head up just a short little trip up to Raleigh to take on JMU. What's that?
They're there.
They're there. Okay, they're already there. Well,
they're practicing this morning.
All right, then they're way ahead of the curve than me. Then, so they will.
Jack
get set.
is on the way, I believe.
Jack is probably on the way. Not too bad of a drive. Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central checking in with us as he does each and every week. First of all, Jack, appreciate your time this morning. I want to start off with the trivia question. Actually, do you know the name of the now NFL quarterback that was on the NC State team the last time Carolina played in the Raleigh Regional back in 2008?
That would be Russell Wilson, right?
That would be Russell Wilson.
Wow. Look at me go. Thank you guys for having me on. I always appreciate it.
Absolutely. Obviously, we're excited. Carolina in the postseason. We certainly would love to see them playing at home at Founders Park, but didn't end up being in the cards this year. But, played some of their best baseball the entire year last week in Hoover, just a little bit shy of making it to the conference championship game. You've been following this team and the ups and downs all season long. Where are you at as far as confidence level going into tomorrow?
I feel pretty good about it. I'm trying to not have my expectations too high because you never know what can happen with this team, and this entire season has kind of taught you that. But I feel like after the run in Hoover last week, I think they should have won all 5 of those games. And if they clean up the errors like I think they will, and I think the pitching is going to do fine and the hitting, then I think you can definitely go out here and win this regional. But, again, some things kind of have to come together for this team in order for that to happen. And it starts with the pitching and the defense.
Hey, Jack, appreciate you doing this, man. Hopefully y'all got up there safely. And so speaking of the pitching, I know Mark Kingston will speak later today. Hopefully he'll announce a starter. How do you think you'll play this thing, or how would you play this thing? Obviously, there's not like a true ace, so maybe it just comes down at some point to specific matchups with these particular teams. But any idea which way they'll go as far as how to map this thing out?
Well, I think it's either one of two ways. I think, winning, making it into the winner's bracket is super, super important, and starting off 2-0 makes it a lot easier because all you have to do is win one more game after that and you advance, as opposed to, if you lose your first game, you're in the loser's bracket and you got to play maybe 4 more games to win a title. And for South Carolina, I don't know which way they're going to go. They could go bullpen game tomorrow versus JMU, but I think they're going to start Eli Jones tomorrow. That's just what I'm sensing if I had to take a guess. I think he's going to get a start tomorrow, and I think they're going to ride him as long as they can. And then, you save most of the bullpen, hopefully, for Saturday. And I think you would start Garrett Gainey with a chance to, go 2-0. And, again, you figure out a way to puzzle it together for Game 3. But I think starting those two guys, it'd be a little different from what they've done with these bullpen games. But I think it's a good chance to do it right here.
Now, of course, Garrett Gainey has been the best pitcher for this team as of late, and we've seen him shift between that starting role and the bullpen role. I mean, would you think maybe you'd prefer to have him on the back end of maybe the game tomorrow and then use him in a second situation later on this weekend, or you think definitively he's going to be a starter at some point?
Yeah, I definitely think it can go either way. I don't know what they're thinking this week, right? Because it could be 3 games, it could be 5. That's kind of the thing here, but I think you want to keep it to 3 games, win 3 in a row, and move on. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to have to use guys in dire situations that you're going to have to really push them out a little bit and use them a little more extensively, kind of like what you did with Chris Veach last week. So I think it's all about who's hot and who's rolling, and you have a lot more options this week out of your bullpen compared to before Hoover. So we'll just have to see how Mark Kingston wants to puzzle it together.
Jack, we just talked to Katie Harper, who covers this JMU team up that way, and she was telling us, the pitching for them may be a little bit of an issue, top to bottom, a pretty good lineup for JMU. However, man, I think you look at it, this is, to me, similar to kind of a midweek opponent South Carolina might play. It's just on a much bigger stage and a much bigger, obviously, with a lot more on the line, I should say. But, Jack, for me, for South Carolina, the defense ultimately is the thing you have to circle, because I think against these opponents, the pitching should be fine. They should be able to hit, but we all saw how important the defense was this past week. So what do you think they can do to just rebuild the confidence among these guys? And I know Carolina's going to hit the field maybe in an hour or so. You'll be out there. You got to think some focus on fundamentals and building confidence will be a big part of what they've tried to do this week.
Yeah, they definitely have to play defense behind their pitching, because statistically speaking, there was a stat, I think, I can't remember who tweeted it out. But anyway, I mean, statistically speaking, South Carolina has the best pitching in this regional amongst the other three teams. And look, it does come down to defense, because I think if South Carolina doesn't make 10 errors in the final 3 games of Hoover, we're talking about the Gamecocks potentially playing Tennessee for an SEC title. And I think you got to clean the defense up somehow. And, I mean, look, Kingston said that they're going to work on it this week. He promised that would be the case. And we'll see a little bit of it today during their open practice and see what kind of drills they do and stuff. But I definitely expect, like, I cannot see a way in which the defense is worse than last week. Like, it was atrocious last week. There's no way. I mean, they've shown times this year where they can play clean baseball. It's just, can you get in the front of the ball and knock it down and field it? That's the big thing. You got to be positioned well, and I think that's kind of where some of these errors have occurred, is guys not being in the right spots.
And talking to Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central on his way up to Raleigh for the regional this upcoming weekend. And, despite the defensive issues last week, this team, I think made people feel a little bit more confident coming away from Hoover than where they were going into, of course, right in that 6-game losing streak. This is a team that it's been a roller coaster of emotions this year, ups and downs. And we know that the level of expectation going in was, okay, you got to a super last year. You should, at minimum, probably get back there this year going into the season. But where we sit right now, what we know about this team as of today, if you had to put the scale of pressure from 1 to 10, what's the pressure on this team going into tomorrow?
It's a great question. From a fan base perspective, I would say the pressure is like a 10, because I think many fans probably think that if South Carolina doesn't make it out of a regional this weekend, Mark Kingston's going to get fired. I think that's what some fans want, and I think they'd rather see that than their team win, which, quite frankly, I don't understand. But I think from the player perspective and inside the clubhouse, I think they're playing loose right now. Like, they went into Hoover with, obviously there was pressure to win a game or two, so that way you can solidify your tournament status. But they played loose and had fun and got the job done. They won 3 games. So I think they're going to do the same type of thing where they, keep it chill and, not worry about what others on the outside think. But from an outside perspective, there's obviously pressure to, win a regional. There always is. That's South Carolina for you. It's, the expectation is to win here. They know the standard, and they're going to do their best to go out and get it done, in my opinion.
Jack, I know when Casas got hurt, it looked kind of dire for him, and there's a little bit of talk of, hey, this could be a Christian Walker situation. What was the latest that Kingston has said or that you've heard about? Is there any chance Gavin is able to play in this postseason, or do you think that would be just a huge bonus if he could?
Yeah, we're going to see what happens. We will have a better idea what the case is when we're out here watching the practice and stuff. Because my thing is, if Gavin's out here, we saw him, I think, on Monday with like a brace on his wrist or whatever. If he's, out there taking grounders or whatever and working and stuff, then I feel like, okay, maybe there's a chance. But the way Kingston's kind of talked about it, it doesn't feel like he's going to play. I feel like I said all week, I think Tyler Causey's going to get a chance at third, because I cannot see a way in which Lee Ellis or Talmadge LeCroy gets to start tomorrow with the way the defense has been in their offense. I think Causey gives you a different look. He's a left-handed bat. He's basically, if Gavin Casas weren't on this team, I think Tyler Causey would be the regular starter. That's just kind of how it works. But I definitely don't expect Gavin to play this weekend. But, I mean, never say never. We're going to see what happens here in about 45 minutes with practice, but that should give us an indicator, and then obviously we'll talk to Kingston after and hopefully get a little more of a further update.
Yeah, Jack, you're reading my mind. I was about to go back to third base. I kind of wish we were able to talk to you after the practice because I think you'll have a much better feel, and I'm sure you'll have that on your Twitter and on Gamecock Central as well. But so you think Causey? I mean, is there not? I mean, I know there's risk in whatever they do. I feel like that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy to go play third base in a regional after not really playing there this season for the most part.
Well, think about it this way. They threw Lee Ellis out there in the middle of a semifinal game, an elimination game in the fifth inning, and he had never played third base this season. So
we see how it turned out, though.
Yeah, we saw how it turned out. I mean, he got, caught stealing and all that. Then he made 2 errors. I mean, look, we'll see what happens. I think at this point, here's the thing with Causey. I don't know about his glove defensively at third base. King says he could play first, second, and third, which I think is true. His bat is obviously pretty good. I think it's a good, he hasn't played since April 20th. That's the only thing that kind of worries me. But at this point, you gotta run someone else out there. The confidence of Ellis and Lee Croy must be not as high right now, and I'm sure every time they go out there at third base, as soon as the ball hits, I'm sure they feel the weight of the world on their shoulders, and that's not something you want for a guy that's guys are trying to get out of a rut. So I think putting a new guy in there and seeing what they can do, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But I think people also forget this with Gavin at third. I mean, yeah, he's a great hitter, but at the same time, it's not like he's this world-class defender that people probably think he is with his absence. I mean, he's made 10 errors this year, which is the most on the team. So I think at this point, just throw anyone out there. And, Causey's played third before in the past, according to Kingston. So we're going to see what happens, but it'll definitely be interesting. I think that's probably the way they'd go.
Well, we're hoping for the best this weekend, and we'll see what happens. Appreciate it as always, Jack.
Thank you guys so much. Always appreciate it.
All right, we'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Garnet Trust Hour coming up next here on the game. Welcome back in, Garnet Chest Hour. Souderhead, Wes Mitchell, along with you for a couple more minutes here. Chris Clark will jump in with us for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs at the 11 o'clock. We posed a question earlier on when we talked about the new sponsorship potentially coming to college football, be on the field, jersey patch, those kind of things. What are some very Carolina-esque sponsors that might be able to find their way onto Williams-Brice Stadium or the jerseys for Carolina football? Nameless texter weighs in and says, put a Waffle House logo at the 25-yard line. I like the idea, but have you ever seen Waffle House advertise? You ever seen a commercial, billboard, anything like that? Well, billboard, sure, but they don't advertise.
Do they not?
I don't think they do. I think we just know about it. It's one of those things that word of mouth has gone so far that everybody's just aware of it.
That's a good point.
They don't need to advertise.
But it is a great idea.
It is.
They wanted to. Because you do have, what was the thing going around? South Carolina has the closest Waffle House, I think, in the country to their stadium.
I believe so. They got to have the closest Bojangles. That thing is practically in the stadium there on Bluff Road.
Yeah. So
it makes sense.
It was a good answer. What else we got?
Lizard Thickets, obviously local, close here.
They ain't dropping $5 million.
I don't know what their advertising budget is. That one might be a little high there. Let's see. I don't know, going corporations here. Monty weighs in with Michelin, Boeing, and BMW all have operations in the state. So
BMW would be cool.
That'd be cool. Get everybody a Benz.
Well, you get everybody a BMW.
A Beamer. Sorry.
Yeah.
A Beamer. There you go. Makes perfect sense.
I know the players would be for it. It could just be a big trade out where everybody gets a free vehicle.
Utah, all their guys got like pickup trucks or something like that from some NIL deal they had.
Which I still don't know how that worked.
I don't either.
Like I don't know how financially
it was a lease thing, and you have to
for 85 guys. Like it's a lot of free cars.
I think all the cars weren't they like wrapped the same way? Like how do you know which one's yours? Oh, mine's 23. I'm 84.
Yeah, it's one of those things that sounds cool in theory, and I guess you'd take a free car regardless.
Oh,
but
totally.
Probably some guys who were getting paid very well. Otherwise, they're just like, I'll buy my own car.
Yeah, I guess you have the option to defer it if you want to. Like, no, I got a Dodge Charger. I'm good. I transferred from Alabama. I still got my Alabama Charger.
You and every other player in the SEC. I feel like
Mike weighs in with Denny's, and kind of similar to Waffle House.
Yeah,
I think people would lean more towards the Waffle House thing.
Yeah, good answers. We still prefer Firehouse Subs.
Yeah, Rushes. Again, I don't know what their advertising budget is. Might be a little steep for them.
Yeah, too local.
Maybe.
Now on field, what did they say? The estimate was $1 million.
For the on field.
That seems largely. I mean, it's obviously not chump change, but that's largely more affordable feeling to me than when you start talking about 5 times that for a jersey sponsorship.
Right.
Like and I actually, you look at the numbers, if the TV ratings continue to go up, the jerseys, I mean, that's probably the starting point for what a jersey is worth.
No doubt. That'll skyrocket as time goes along. That might be one of those things you want to get in as quick as you can while the price is still low. In fact, RJ Extra brings up an interesting point. It says, do you not believe any company that would put a patch on, let's say, a Georgia jersey would lose customers by rivals that don't want to be associated with the sponsor of their rival team? It's an interesting question to ask.
Yeah, and I think even if you're like not even something as big as that, you'll see a lot of the kind of bigger but more local, bigger but sort of regional companies. They'll support like South Carolina and Clemson, because they don't want to pick favorites.
Oh, totally.
And so you're probably not going to be the jersey sponsor though for both of them. So that is kind of a good point.
Yeah, and again, that there is certainly a lot more passion in college sports than say like Major League Baseball, where I don't think people are looking at Quikrete and saying, well, they're the sponsor of the Braves, I'm not going to use them for my driveway or something along those lines. But you might run into that in college sports. You never know.
Well, there are fanatics in college football, and that's why we love it.
True.
And that's why we even have college football. I do hope, the commercialization of college football, I hope it doesn't go so far as to the point that you turn off the fans, the very people that made all this possible. So obviously the players themselves have long deserved a cut of the pie. I truly believe that. But ultimately, if the stands are not full and people aren't supporting college football, all that goes away. So it can't go too far in one direction that you alienate all the people that have made college football great from a support standpoint.
That is the fine line that we walk with all these changes. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what's on the horizon, but definitely not your grandpa's college football anymore, that's for sure. That'll do it for today's edition of the Garnet Trust Hour. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
All right, guys, coming up, we'll have the GC Takeover Hour brought to you, as always, by our friends at Firehouse Subs. Hit up Firehouse Subs right now, either on the app or online at firehousesubs.com, and order your Rapid Rescue to go. It is by far the easiest, most efficient way to get your lunch. Avoid the wait. Order online. They're going to have that sub waiting for you right there on the shelf in a bag when you walk in, with your chips in the bag as well. You want to try something new? The Barbecue Cuban is back. Get ready for slow-smoked pulled pork, honey ham, melted Swiss, spicy pickle chips, chipotle slaw, golden barbecue sauce, all, as always, on a toasted sub roll. If you want to try it, this was National Brisket Day earlier this week. Try my favorite. It's brisket, add bacon. But whatever you like, whatever your preference, I promise you there's a great sub for you at Firehouse Subs. Head on over again, firehousesubs.com. Best way to do it, download the Firehouse Subs app now.
11 o'clock on your Thursday. Welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Ed, West Metro, Chris Clark along with you. Talking all things baseball as we're getting set for regional action coming up tomorrow. Gamecocks take on James Madison in game number 1 up in Raleigh. And then if they advance in the winner's bracket, take on the winner of NC State and Bryant on Saturday. And, of course, you got to win 3 games to get out of the regional. If you lose 2, you are done. So it could be a short weekend, could be a long weekend. We'll see what happens. I want to go back to something that Wes and I were talking about with Jack Beltry in that last hour that we can get a chance to expand on a whole lot. The Gavin Casas thing. We know he hurt his hand against Kentucky on Friday, didn't play on Saturday. He had a litany of issues at third base, on Saturday between Lee Croy and Ellis, and we don't know his status as of yet. Jack's going to go out there and observe practice later on today, and we'll get a report. But, the hot corner is obviously very important on defense, as we saw on Saturday. And, I don't really know which way this could go this weekend if Casas is not healthy and available.
Yeah, you first of all, you hate it for Gavin. And, even if he's available in a role, how much does that affect his ability to go play third base? And third base, we know, is actually not really his natural position anyway. And so, just without any inside information whatsoever, I don't think you should count on seeing much from Casas at third base. Could you potentially see him at first base? At times, maybe. Could he be in a pinch hit situation? Maybe. We'll see. Obviously, Kingston will talk more about that later on, and Jack will be able to observe practice. I think that's in about 30 minutes. So we'll have a little bit better feel, maybe even before the show is over. But solving third base, obviously, is something that I don't know if there's a perfect answer. To me, so let's... Casas is obviously part of the conversation, but let's say he's not available or not available in that role. Do you, as Jack sort of talked about, Causey could be an option that gets you another bat into the lineup, and that was the entire point of playing Gavin over there in the first place, was to get another bat in the lineup. But you're also talking about somebody who hasn't hit in a real game in a month. Which he was playing a lot earlier this year, had some good moments. And, so that gets him in the lineup. Or, you have a freshman in Lee Ellis, who obviously you think is a talented kid, but is really more of a shortstop. Mm-hmm. You're putting him in a tough spot. You already put him in a tough spot last week. Or you go to Lee Croy, who has been your guy for most of the last 2 years, but just is probably feeling it right now. So is there a perfect answer? No. I know what way I would go, but what would y'all think first?
Oh, nice tease. I think you might have to separate it between, what would you do and then what will they do, right? Those might be 2 different things. What will South Carolina actually do? How are they looking at it versus, if you were calling the shots, what would you do? And obviously, from a decision-making standpoint, South Carolina staff, they'll make something that ends up being a good decision or a bad decision. Maybe based on the results, if you believe in that type of thing. I don't really. But they're in the dugout. They watch practice. They can assess better than we can, like the mental state of players. It's exactly what you said, Wes. Like if you're Talmadge Lee Croy, if you're Lee Ellis, you're kind of going through it a little bit possibly, in the aftermath of those games. Because things kind of got off the rails, right? Remember Garrett Gainey showing some great leadership, I thought, going over to Lee Ellis immediately after that play and saying, hey.
That was an awesome moment.
I don't know what he said, but it's probably shake it off. We need you. We're going to need you. Don't worry about it. Let's go. Let's go play some baseball. It was a great moment, a great leadership by him. But, I think you have to, when it comes to errors, there's obviously been, I think, some type of mental component for this team lately. I mean, 12 errors in the field during the tournament. That tied the SEC tournament record, and they should have broken it. I mean, we broke that down earlier in the week. Some of those should have been on the board as errors. So I think that's the biggest thing. Like, these guys can make these plays. They're college baseball players at South Carolina in the SEC, and a lot of the plays that we've seen, balls roll into the outfield are plays that these guys have made. Casas has made them. Lee Ellis has made them. Lee Croy's made them. You know, so you have to kind of, I think, more than anything, assess what is their mental state, right? And then if you feel good about that, you know, you have to go make a decision from there.
And that's the tricky thing about, again, they're going to be practicing today. They've been practicing this week as well, and I'm sure they've lined up Lee Croy at third base and hit him a million balls off the fungo at 100 miles an hour just to get him back in the groove. And it's one thing to go out there in a practice situation and show that, hey, I'm not making mistakes, I'm making these throws, fielding these balls correctly and all that kind of stuff. But it's another thing to do it in a game. And it's one of those things like you're not going to truly know if the problem has been fixed until you get somebody out there in a game environment. Because, again, you can be a superstar in practice and still go out there and still make the same mistakes in game. So you're not really going to know until, again, like you said, Chris, you just make a decision and see how it pans out.
And that's coaching. And that's, frankly, one of the hardest things for coaches to do really is when they kind of turn their guy loose and say, go out into the world. And I hope if you're a safety, I hope you make the right read. If you're a baseball player, I hope you rely on your fundamentals and don't get too caught up in the moment. And short of other great options, I think you got to roll the guy out there who has been playing the spot pretty much the entire year. Mm-hmm. I think you have to have a plan in the back of your mind, but I think you have to a backup plan in the back of your mind. But you got to tell Lee Croy, you're our guy. And we took you out in the SEC championship or SEC tournament because you were feeling it at the moment, and we needed to get you out there to reset for another day. I'd spend this whole week building up his confidence. You've got to get something from him at the plate as well. And I think it's got to the point where some baseball players can it's very hard to do, but can kind of compartmentalize what I'm doing in the field versus what I'm doing at the plate. It feels like those two things have kind of started to affect each other. And for him and for this team, you actually kind of are hoping that he gets a hot shot hit at him in the first inning. Everybody who's ever made an error and is kind of in that kind of almost defensive mindset as opposed to a aggressive mindset on defense wants to get the first one out of their way, because if the first one is hit to you and you make an error, then it just feels like every eyeball in the world is looking at you.
Right.
And so you're feeling that pressure right now if you're him. But I think you got to show confidence in him and throw him back out there. Causey would just be, in my opinion, a huge risk. I'm not saying they won't do it. We've seen Kingston be willing to roll guys out there.
They'll shake it up.
Especially if he thinks they're the better hitter. But you're going to need, if you're going to go to Omaha, this is not slow pitch softball. This is not where you can just hide somebody in right field if they're not a good defender or put them at catcher. The ball is going to be hit to third base. If you're going to make a run to Omaha, you ultimately are going to need Tal Lee Croy to play and play fairly well. So I say you just roll him right back out there.
And that's the thing, like last week, in Hoover, and obviously we wanted to see South Carolina win a couple games to improve their, seeding in the NCAA tournament, which they did. And if you decided to roll out Causey last week, that's one thing, because you still have more baseball to play after that. Even if you do get eliminated from the tournament, you're still going to a regional. It's do or die now. You lose 2 games, you're done. Like, that is such a risk you'd be taking if you throw him out there, somebody that hasn't played that position in a while, or even if he is a better bat at the plate, because like you said, the ball is going to find its way to the hot corner, as it often does. And the last thing you want is it to be even worse by throwing out a guy that just has not been playing that position as much.
I think what you're banking on, too, is some type of reversion to the mean of, not that South Carolina, we covered this earlier in the week, not that you looked around and you said, this is the, top 5 defensive team in the country. Like, nobody said that, right?
979 fielding percentage.
979 fielding percentage. And even if you go look individually, Tal Lee Croy didn't struggle as much as he did in the SEC tournament in spots throughout the year, right? Not that he was, necessarily a top 5 infielder in the country. But I think you've got to bank on getting some type of, averaging out a little bit, where you're not going to look back and say, okay, you had 12 errors in the SEC tournament and 10 of them came in a couple games and it really should have been 14, 15 errors overall. you got to look at it and say, what's our best lineup? What has gotten us here? And I just think I'm with you, Wes. Probably a few too many questions to shake it up that much, especially when Causey hadn't played in a while. Lee Ellis is a freshman. I know Kingston's going to say we're confident in Lee Ellis, et cetera, and maybe there's some spots for him. But I think out of all the options that I can see, that seems to be the best one to me.
Well, let's say you say, all right, we're going Causey. What if you go with Causey and it doesn't, and it's just like, it doesn't work, and it's just painfully obvious it's not working? Then you have to go to LeCroy when you have not built him up. You have not built up his confidence. You have said, you've been our guy for really the better part of 2 years at third base, but we don't trust you. But now it's the fifth inning, and we've had 2 errors from the third base spot. Now go out there. So if it's reversed, I think you have to just pour as much confidence as you can into LeCroy. If he still sort of has issues, then Causey is maybe your break glass in case of emergency guy. Now, the one thing we don't know, we're not in the locker room. We're not looking LeCroy in the eye. We don't know, does he still have his sort of killer instinct that every major SEC baseball player at some level does have? Or are they looking at him saying, he just doesn't have it right now? That's what we don't know.
Right.
But I think, and this is a guy from a long list of big-time baseball players in his family. He's grown up, kind of born to play the game. Say what you will about how things have happened this year. I think you got to roll the guy out there and hope something good happens early.
That's why coaches get paid a lot more than us to make these decisions.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and kind of stated the same earlier. The mental state of players is something that you've really got to assess when it comes to deep. And I feel like it's almost a little bit. It might be similar to a guy going through a hitting slump. Do you keep a guy in there? Do you let him work through it? And you kind of go to the past. If you've got a guy in there, like let's say Cole Messina, had really been slumping. Well, Cole Messina's got a body of work. What he's capable of. What he can do. He's a guy that you're going to let work through it, right? And so
right.
I think that's what you've got to do defensively. Do you put LeCroy back out there? Do you try to let him build up? I think he's more of a proven commodity than some of the other options that we've been discussing. So it'll be interesting to see, what they ultimately go with. And even if this thing shifts and changes, once they get into regional play.
Again, the team will be practicing shortly up there in Raleigh. Jack Veltru will have all the coverage of that on Gamecock Central. We'll get hopefully some idea of what they're going to do at third base going into tomorrow's game. We'll switch gears a little bit. SEC spring meeting is going on down in Destin. Coach Beamer is speaking this week about some of the things changing in college football and something that might be going away in terms of walk-ons. Gave his thoughts on that. We'll dive into that coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
Our friends over at Integrated Media can help bring your home into the modern age, because when you choose Integrated Media to install your smart home systems or do anything that you need at your home or business from an audiovisual standpoint, they're going to help you be amazed by what your phone can do. Utilizing your smartphone, you can control your lights, your thermostat, your sound systems, TVs, security cameras, and your alarm. Again, all from the touch of a button. Go check out what they can do at integratedmediainc.com. They've got reviews there for you. They have a lot all about their services. Again, security and cameras, TV installations, audio, video, home theater, and complete smart home solutions where you can control everything in your home from the touch of a button. 803-948-8327 or go to their website, integratedmediainc.com. Michael, Nathan, their team, I can personally attest to the fact they're awesome. They've been to my home, integratedmediainc.com.
Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Lewis, Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you. SEC spring meetings rolling along down in Destin. We've heard from a couple coaches this week. Shane Beamer down there, of course. One thing that he has talked about and focused on a little bit this week, as there's a lot to unpack from the House versus NCAA, settlement case. One thing that's been floated out there is the potential elimination of walk-ons, where you would have everybody that is on your team be a scholarship athletes. Though the scholarships could be expanded, but you would eliminate the ability for somebody to just walk on your football program, start on the practice squad, whatever it may be. And that's something Shane Beamer, a former walk-on himself for his dad's team back at Virginia Tech, is very much against, telling the state newspaper, absolutely against it. I understand the financial aspect of it, but I think that's completely asinine. And a lot of coaches share the same sentiment with Coach Beamer on this is not something that they are willing or wanting to see go away in this new era of college football that we're on the precipice of.
I don't think you're going to find any coaches who agree with the idea of doing away with walk-ons. And, it would be much more of an NFL, once again, as with everything we've been talking about, a little bit more of an NFL approach, but the amount of sort of effort and time that walk-ons put in terms of practice and in terms of how you logistically run a practice at the college level, and ultimately some of those guys end up playing, as we know, it would completely change the way you do things, I think, in college football. And so I think the NCAA is looking at it as, all right, all this extra money is now going to go to the players. Then you have an issue of, all right, scholarship versus not scholarship. How does the revenue share affect non-scholarship guys and walk-ons? So let's do away with it just in totality and just say you got this number of guys and that's that. Everybody gets the same. But how many opportunities are you doing away with by doing that for, let's say, the player who just is good enough to play at South Carolina, but is not a highly recruited guy, would never have a scholarship out of high school, but is willing to just go play for the love of the game?
Yep.
And how many guys out of that sort of small group, you have this even smaller group, that actually do one day earn a scholarship? You're doing away with the opportunities potentially for all those guys, because you have 85 scholarship guys, but you have upwards of 115 to a little bit more, depending. I think a lot of that actually goes back to Title IX even, as far as your exact number of your total roster you can have. It's a little bit different for every school, I believe, if I remember correctly. But it's about 30 guys that you're just saying you can't play.
I was going to say, and Beamer says, as of right now, there's 120 players on the roster, so 35 walk-on guys in addition to the 85 scholarship guys they have right now. And again, he brings up a good point as well in this article from Jordan Kay, the state newspaper, that, a season ago when they dealt with all the injuries they had on the offensive line, they relied on those guys, and maybe not necessarily to jump in to the starting roles, but just to have some bodies in practice to be able to fill out some of the spots where they were so injured at.
Yeah, I mean, it would logistically change practice, but, I think beyond that, I really don't like when people say things like they're ruining college sports, because a lot of times there's not actually anything behind that.
Just an opinion.
They just basically mean, I don't like this aspect. Like, I don't like that players are getting paid. That's ruining college sports. Well, it's not really, because it just doesn't. Now, but when you start getting into something like this, or something else that's been discussed, cutting sports, right? If schools look around and go, okay, especially like non-SEC, like non-Power 4 programs, if they're looking around going, all right, we got to pay out these players, et cetera, like we've got a big-time problem here. We don't have enough money to do it. Then maybe you got to look at cutting sports, and then you got to still adhere to Title IX, so you got to cut multiple sports. Those are things that actually could mess up the fabric of college sports. And, walk-ons, I mean, that's one of the greatest parts about the game. Like, there's so many players at here and at other schools you can look back on. I mean, some of South Carolina's best kickers, many of them started as walk-ons. Jalen Foster was a walk-on at South Carolina who, eventually became an All-American. Shane Beamer told a story a few years ago when a walk-on conversation came up that one of their graphics in the football facility is they're playing Alabama, number 1 Alabama in 2010, and you've got Stephon Gilmore and Antonio Allen standing over Trent Richardson after they tackled him, but Blake Baxley is back there also on a kickoff, and Beamer himself obviously being a former walk-on. And you can just think of so many guys here or at other schools that have walked on, like you said, Wes, maybe earned a scholarship, found success. A lot of them have gotten into coaching, as a result. So those are the types of things where if you're someone that says they're messing up college athletics, they're completely changing the fabric of it, this is something that if it happened, you could actually have some teeth behind that statement.
And this is a shining example of when you have people in suits that get together in a room and try and look at things from a purely financial standpoint. Something sounds like a good idea on paper and says, okay, well, this, means we can save this money or allocate the funds this way or whatever. But when you're actually talking about the human element of it, and again, those guys that have been able to get scholarships, I mean, we have the Bullsworth Award they hand out every single year for somebody that started out their career as a walk-on that is, proven to be a great player or something along those lines. King Dominion Ford got the scholarship this past year from Coach Beamer, and the great, video that went on social media about all that kind of stuff. Like, that is stuff that we love about the game of college football that I don't think anybody wants to see go away.
Yeah, our guy Hunter Rogers, didn't he go on scholarship?
Yep.
Is he on scholarship? So it's a way to reward the guys that have put their heart and soul into your program and are truly, I think, what athletics are ultimately built on. When you strip away the fame and the money and all those things, ultimately you go back to a kid playing a game that they love. So, you tend to think this one will get so much pushback that I don't see how it passes, but I guess you never know. And is it, Chris, is this purely just a financial?
Yeah, it would be. That's my understanding of it, at least, is looking around going, oh, we're going to have roster limits, things like that.
Like, who is quietly pushing that?
That's a great question. I don't really know. I haven't dug deep enough to really know.
So somebody is like, they're not tweeting about it, but somebody is quietly saying, hey, this is going to cost a lot of money. We should probably limit.
Well,
but at the same time, you're adding more scholarships, so it costs more by adding more scholarship players that you would then have to pay, as opposed to, say, keeping it at 85 and still having walk-ons, right? Am I doing that math right in my head?
I don't know. When Trev Alberts, who's now the AD at A&M, came over from Nebraska, and he was talking about, I think, this and a bunch of other aspects that are being discussed financially and the impact that this is going to have on athletics departments. Again, cutting the sports and all these different things. And he has said, I've said it for years, we do not have a revenue problem. We have an expense problem. And this is something that other people have pointed out. Really, we can pay coaches, who are, yes, they're good at their jobs, they deserve to be compensated well, but, you got multiple coaches making $10 million a year. And we're saying there's no room to pay players. Mm-hmm. There's administrators at schools. Again, many of them have put in their time and effort and deserve to be compensated well also, but you've got school administrators making hundreds of thousands of dollars. You've got schools spending gobs of money on facilities that are nice, but are they completely necessary? Probably not. So I think we'll have to look a little bit more into like the why of the walk-on thing and, what the financial effect would be, like you said, Tyler. But certainly a lot of this is tracing back to, I think a lot of administrators are already setting this thing up as, okay, well, we can do this, but we're going to have to cut this and this and this.
Right. So a lot of decisions to be made, and again, a lot of things on the table of what the future of college sports is going to be like and the future of walk-ons. Certainly something that could be hanging in the balance as those decisions do get made. We'll stick with football. Very, very important weekend coming up. A lot of official visits going on as we get in, technically the month of May, still tomorrow, but the month of June starting this weekend, and some big visitors are going to be on campus. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
We got to kill this one. I feel like what's going on. And all right, guys, you're looking for that special gift for a graduate in your life. How about giving the gift of a custom framed diploma from our friends over at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia? Owner Kendall Walsh, manager Joni James, they're going to take great care of you, just like they take great care of us every single time we head on over to Gold Line Framing for a show. They've been in business for over 20 years over at 511 12th Street, West Columbia. You can check out their art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items, all right there in store. And whatever you can think of, they can frame it up for you. Again, that could be original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags, or those diplomas. They have a special going on right now for diplomas that they're extending into the next month. Call them today to set that up. 803-739-1337. If you want to just drop by, they're open Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and then on Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. as well. Again, check out our friends over at Gold Line Framing.
Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you. You guys are going to be a little bit busy tomorrow. Going to be out at camp. We'll dive into that in just a few minutes. But a very busy weekend as we transition into the month of June. A lot of official visits going on. Some pretty big names going to be on campus this weekend.
Yeah, 3 major weekends of official visits. Shane Beamer, I feel like, has mentioned this several times. And I feel like we've been previewing June for like 5 months at this point. Like how early the guys start setting these visits now, man. It was crazy. So you ultimately do have some mixing and matching along the way. Guys will drop off the visit list. Guys will be added to the visit list. And sometimes guys just get moved. Hey, this guy's coming in week 1. Now they're going to be week 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's Thursday. Could there still be changes? Could there still be additions? We've seen that in the past. It's always possible. But for the most part, Chris, we have a pretty good idea of the guys that will be in. And for the most part, I think you're going to kind of see right around, for all 3 weekends, right around that low double digits number. Seems to kind of be what they're aiming for, 10, 12, 13. I don't think, it feels like they don't want to get too much bigger than that as far as the number of guys you're bringing in on one given weekend, because you want to be able to focus specifically on those guys and put your resources into making sure they have that sort of customized experience, that they get all the one-on-one time they need, and that they don't feel like this is like another junior day, basically.
Yeah, it looks like 13 coming in this weekend, 12 or 13, 11 on June 7th, again, as of now, and then on June 21st, which is going to be that last one, 8. So you're typically around, it normally seems to average out around 10 or so, and that's kind of one of the fascinating subplots of official visit season, which has gotten so big now in the summer. I mean, we've mentioned it several times. Shane Beamer's pointed out we're going to have a lot of official visitors in this summer, and these are important because most of the guys, all except for like one, are projected right now. This could always change, but projected right now to make decisions, before the season. So, and chances are there's going to be some changes to the slate like that last weekend. They'll probably end up being a couple guys on this list that drop off, probably be some guys that are added. But we have a pretty good handle on this weekend. But logistically, it's always fascinating to look at this because there's always strategy of when to bring a guy in, but then sometimes you're competing for a given weekend against another school to get a guy in. And then, okay, are you the first, second, third, fourth, fifth visit? And what does that mean for the recruiting? I think you and I both agree getting a guy in first is not always a bad thing. You get a chance to kind of set the bar for a lot of these guys. And they're different levels, I think, to all these prospects that they're bringing in as far as where South Carolina stands with each of them.
Yeah, there really is. And I think naturally fans are like, hey, I want the last visit. And, I think if I could have any visit, for one, you just want to get them on your campus, period. Like, you want to get a visit. That's the first step. If I could have any visit, I think I want first or last, honestly. Like, I like being able to get a guy in and set the bar. Sometimes that means a guy is already maybe heavily leaning towards your school, which is obviously great. And, you look at it, sometimes that means you can go ahead and put yourself in a position where maybe that player just envisions themselves playing at your school. Like, I've always said with these early visits, you want for that player to leave thinking, that's my home. Not like, oh, I took a visit, let me try to remember everything I saw and learned and experienced here, and now I'm just going to go compare it to visit number 2, visit number 3, visit number 4, and then think about them all and make a decision. You want for them to leave Columbia saying, I think that's it. I think I found my place. I think I found my home. And so for some of these guys, frankly, some of them are long shots. Some of them are more what we've called on the GC podcast to be just take a swing, guys. And that means, hey, it's too good of a player. He wants to come to campus. Too good not to take a swing. And so those typically are the guys that are more maybe late additions. You look at like a Dontrell Glover, who I would say South Carolina kind of surprisingly made the top 4. Not that it was a surprise just because, why is he interested in South Carolina? But more so, this wasn't one of the offensive linemen we were as focused on in our coverage as, say, like a Jalen Gilchrist, who South Carolina's been in on for probably actually years, not even months, years. And so, I look at some of these guys, though, you're saying they want to take some more visits, obviously a lot of them, but can you almost close out their recruitments? Like you look at Jared Smith. He's a guy a lot of people think South Carolina leads for behind the scenes right now. Jalen Gilchrist, you can make a pretty strong case that South Carolina has been a long-term leader for him along the way. Malik Clark, a lot of people believe North Carolina currently leads. That's what I've heard, but I don't think it's some insurmountable lead either, where to me, he's one of the guys I'm circling this weekend saying, who do they have a shot with, but they maybe don't necessarily lead for, that they would love to exit the weekend feeling a lot better about? To me, that's Malik Clark.
Yeah, and that's one that I think people are going to key in on for a good reason. I mean, he's from Rock Hill, which has been, not that South Carolina's landed everybody out of Rock Hill, they certainly haven't, but a lot of really, really great elite players from South Carolina in the not-too-distant past have hailed from Rock Hill. He plays the receiver position, which is, I think going to be a priority for them at the high school level. They brought in a couple high school guys in the last class, but they've got one committed this year. But I think they'll kind of pull from the portal and the high school ranks this year. But that's a position where it's important, I think, to get some guys to develop, but also potentially play early for you from high school. He's one, right? And I think people are going to key in on those factors. But then you look at it, North Carolina, it's a school that's had, it's been kind of a thorn in South Carolina's side at times in recruiting. You don't like thinking about a guy from Rock Hill going and getting out of state, number one, but especially going to play for UNC, right? That's kind of a tough thing to think about. And there's been some receivers in the past, Jalen Hyatt is the one that comes to mind, where a little bit different because South Carolina didn't really pursue him very heavily. But he's one of those guys that got out of state and then goes and thrives at a different school and ends up hurting you, actually. So, Gamecock fans don't want that. And so this, I think, is going to be a very, very important visit in that process.
Yeah, and you just look at a position of need, too. And I think you want to kind of step out of this weekend a little bit, big picture-wise, what I've seen and heard about Malik throughout the spring, throughout track season, I think his stock is actually on the way up. And you kind of look at, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, Charles Power and kind of his trying to almost scientifically say, what are the measurables and the metrics and the statistics that matter for high school guys in terms of their chances of becoming NFL guys down the road. You look at what Malik Clark has done, and you look at what his numbers are at this point. You look at his track times. Malik Clark fits all those things you're looking at in terms of being a guy who has a high chance of being a future professional player.
Yeah, I mean, almost 6'3", and what are his times, Wes? I mean, 4.4. 4.4 in the 40. So, just checks athletically all the boxes, and you watch him on film, man, and it checks out. Like, from a trait standpoint, this is the kind of guy you really, really like, and you think back to like Xavier Leggett in high school, right? And even early in his career at South Carolina, not that they're the same player, but you think about those athletic traits. Xavier Leggett actually took up quite a while to develop up until his last year at South Carolina. But one of the big reasons he was able to, in addition to his hard work, was just he had elite traits, and that's why he could catch a slant against an SEC team and take it 75 yards. Malik Clark is a guy that just athletically very, very impressive, in-state guy, position of need, position of focus.
Again, big weekend ahead with all the official visits on campus. And again, tomorrow, Wes and Chris will both be out at camp. We'll get their thoughts on that and what to expect. Looking forward to tomorrow. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West Mitchell, Chris Clark. Along with you for a couple more minutes here. Of course, appreciate everybody watching us on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass and powered by our friends over at Integrated Media. You guys will be out of studio tomorrow, out there at camp. Gonna be a hot one. Stay cool. Bring some water. Stay in the shade as much as you can. What does this look like for you guys? What are you observing? What exactly are you doing when you're out at one of these camps?
Well, this is going to sound funny. The main thing is like It doesn't maybe look like a mad scramble to anybody who might come out and observe, but it's like a mad scramble to figure out who's there. That's the biggest thing. And a lot of times, like tomorrow, an in-state linebacker, Jaquel Holman, who, just won 3 state championships in track and is someone that South Carolina is keeping a close eye on for a potential offer. We know he's going to be there. You typically find out beforehand a few guys that are going to be there, but inevitably there's always some guys that you just spot and like you look, okay, who's that, or you find out so-and-so's here. And so a lot of it is just from an information standpoint, running down who's there. But then beyond that, it's actually going and trying to put eyes on some of the guys that you've been covering. So like Holman, for example, going and watching him in drills. I remember Wes and I were talking about Fred Johnson yesterday, J.R. Johnson, freshman linebacker for Carolina. I remember watching him in camp. We got a hold of his testing numbers, and you go, okay, this kid's 6'3", 225, and just ran a 4.5, and you go watch him in drills, and he looks the part. You say, this kid's probably getting an offer. So a lot of it's just finding out who's there and then trying to pick up a few scouting notes in terms of what guys look like.
You think he gets an offer tomorrow?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, because one thing with Holman, I'm curious to see where does he work out, because he told me when I interviewed him, Clayton White, linebackers coach and defensive coordinator, and Torian Gray, defensive backs coach, they've been going back and forth. Hey, what position is this guy? So does he work out as a linebacker or DB? Does he do some of both? Kind of hard to tell, but a very interesting player as far as the size, the speed, the athleticism. I can see it happening, but I don't know for sure.
In-state guys with measurables.
Yeah.
I mean, I think now it's not foolproof, obviously, but I think you got to take a hard look at offering in-state guys that fit what you're looking for from those measurables standpoint, and that you feel like have a chance. And it's a guy who, I think he's called South Carolina's dream school, would be coming to your school for all the right reasons. And I tend to think if I'm South Carolina, I take a very hard look at offering this guy. Another player I'm interested to see tomorrow that I talked to last week, Trent Seaborn. And, you probably cringe when you hear me say class of 2027.
I do.
Quarterback. I'm right there with you. But this guy already is like a national level recruit and has offers from, multiple SEC schools, including South Carolina. He's an Alabama kid. And so they'll have him on campus, kind of early in the process for him, even though he's been visiting schools already for months. And so I'll be curious to watch him, just because he also could be one of those guys, Chris, even if he doesn't even consider South Carolina down the line, we may be watching his recruitment as like a 5-star guy in a couple of years.
Yeah, I remember being at one of the rivals camps one year, and, now the years run together, so it would have had to have been, I guess, the 2018 class, so it's probably in 2017, and, Trevor Lawrence is there throwing, and, several other guys. You just, that's a pretty cool part of it, is because ultimately you can typically look back at, a certain camp season and say, okay, we saw that guy, and maybe he comes to South Carolina, maybe he doesn't, but you can look back and go, okay, that guy, ended up being a first-round pick and things like that. We've seen a bunch of those. That's always a pretty cool part of it.
2027. That means he'd be going to his sophomore year. Am I thinking correctly on that?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
You got it. That's always a hard math equation to do.
I know.
What year is he again?
Because the school year just technically ended, so a lot of math to do there.
Yeah.
Well, how about this? My man is going into his sophomore year. He's already a 2-year starter at the high school level.
Oh,
think about that.
That's pretty good.
As an 8th grader?
Yes.
How does that work?
What do you mean? He's just that good.
Okay.
You get called up. Get called up to varsity. He's that good.
Guess so. That's rare.
At a Alabama powerhouse too, and won a state championship as a 8th grade quarterback.
Jeez.
Thompson.
So,
yeah, they win lots of games.
That's Alabaster, Alabama.
That doesn't scream 5-star. I don't know what does.
Yeah. Plus Auburn and Alabama already involved. I mean,
of course they are.
It's So again, 2027. I know you're like, I don't care, but this is like future national level guy. Maybe you already call him a national level guy if you can call somebody that's hasn't even started their sophomore year a national guy.
We're going to need to go get some sleep after the show because Month is about to get I know, and I'm not complaining what Wes doesn't like, sports media complainer guy. I'm not. I'm just pointing out it's about to get pretty crazy in Columbia. Lots of official visits, unofficial visits, camps. It's going to be a busy month.
Yeah, Tyler was teeing us up to complain about the heat already tomorrow.
Well, I know you're not.
Probably.
I was just advising you to stay in the shade.
Wear your sunscreen.
Bring some water. Wear some sunscreen. Preparing you. I know, Wes, you hate the guy that's out there on the first day of camp saying, man, it's hot out here. It's August. Of course it's hot out here.
I try to be cognizant when I'm around Wes. I'm like, how many times have I said that I'm hot? Let me stop.
I feel
I'm
like
not gonna say
I
it
feel like
tomorrow.
you would do it more, given the fact that you know Wes so well.
No, I'm not going to annoy him on purpose. I'm gonna try. That'll be my goal. I'm gonna try not to say it at all tomorrow.
Well, you know what?
I'm gonna secretly be counting.
I don't know which one of you is going to be checking in with me on the show tomorrow, but that's the first question I'm going to ask: is how hot is it outside?
It'll be Chris. Though.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm good.
We're gonna send intern
great.
Joe for the report.
We'll check in with them out at camp tomorrow. Also talk plenty of baseball as well as we'll be getting these set for the Gamecocks and James Madison tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, all right here on the game. Halftime show with myself, Terry Ford, coming up next. It's been the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.